So recently I decided to revisit Edge of Tomorrow, directed by Doug Liman, starring Tom Cruise, Emily Blunt, and Bill Paxton. Set during an alien invasion where the human race is on the brink of ending the war between them and an alien race that has invaded the planet Earth. During the thick of the battle, Major William Cage, played by Tom Cruise, gets infected with alien blood while also being killed, and finds himself repeating the exact same day again, and with the help of Sergeant Vertasky, has to find a way to stop the alien invasion. If you somehow have never seen Edge of Tomorrow, you're missing out. This, I think, is one of the most underrated films of the last decade, but spoiler warning in case you haven't. The plot and characterizations are very simplistic. There's not a whole lot of depth that's given to anybody in here. I remember very specifically, it was in the early days of my reviewing movies on this platform. Coming off of Ghost Protocol a couple years prior, Tom Cruise was yet riding another high in his career, but then he did Oblivion, which I think we can all agree that was... yeah, the less said about that, the better. So in light of Oblivion, I wasn't really that excited about Edge of Tomorrow. Even though the trailers did look kind of promising on my end, I still thought that this was going to be a repeat of what we saw in Oblivion. But I was quite surprised walking out of the theater, and I wanted to slap myself for being so skeptical going in. The thing that really stands out about Edge of Tomorrow, even though it does take certain elements from other films like Groundhog Day, Alien, and Saving Private Ryan, it all manages to blend together to create a very unique type of plot. Although this is a loose adaptation or inspiration of a Japanese novel called All You Need Is Kill. Its use of the Groundhog Day elements where Major Cage relives the same day all over again, running into certain encounters that he experiences where he does remember what's going to happen, but the film also wisely decides to breeze over certain parts that we've already seen the first few times. Once he starts to piece together what's going to happen, and he tries to tell people what's going on, of course nobody believes him and they write him off as a nutcase. Is that an officer's uniform? These sure are an officer's cufflinks. He tries to fight on his own, but then runs into Sergeant Vertasky on the beach, who tells him to come find her when he wakes up. Once he meets up with her, he finds out through her and her friend, who studies the biology of the mimics, that the blood that Cage got infected with is giving him the ability to reset the day, and until they destroy the Omega, he has to die every day and navigate his way to where the hiding spot is. As for the comparisons to Alien, the biggest one is the sergeant played by Bill Paxton, who's just there to be the stereotypical southerner who enlisted in the army and is very gung-ho about fighting the enemy. It's a great day for you, Private. Battle is the great redeemer. The fact that he's played by Bill Paxton makes it all the better, and it really makes me sad that we lost him when he did. I don't know if I'd like to say one of a kind, but he really was, in a lot of ways, a one of a kind type of actor. He brought a very unique style that you wouldn't really see today in movies like this. Brendan Gleeson shows up as the British general, and I guess he's the supreme commander of the Allied forces, kind of like Dwight Eisenhower during the Second World War. Please correct me politely if I'm wrong on this. I believe he's supposed to be a British general in this movie, but his Irish accent is a dead giveaway, but even then, who cares? On that note of the Allied forces, the invasion takes place on the coast of France. I'm guessing in the same general area of Normandy. And this film, at the time of its release, premiered in May 28th of 2014 and got a wider release in the United States on June 6th of 2014, 70 years after the invasion of Normandy. Couldn't help but find that very fascinating. Hence why I got this D-Day shirt on right now. And I know it's a month late since I wanted to put this out, but I just ran out of time, but better late than never. The film also really shows just how they managed to get smarter after each passing day when they figure out where the mimics are going to end up. Cage and Vertasky wisely start to plan their movements on how they're going to get to one area, then a mimic's going to pop up, then one has to do this or the other. We start to realize that there's other encounters that they experienced, or if they get up in a helicopter, the mimics are going to see them and they're going to kill them. It's also subtly implied that Major Cage starts to get to know Vertasky, to the point where he starts to care and doesn't want to see her get killed. Vertasky's very cut off after getting close to one other person at Verdun, where she was labeled as a war hero. As for the characters, very simplistic in their characterizations, but maybe I'm reading too much into this. I think it's intentionally simplistic. It's not the kind of movie I think that we need to know everything that really deep about who we're rooting for here. I think it's kind of like the movie Lone Survivor, where there is some setup and payoff, but not so much of a big character or story arc. To say that Tom Cruise is just Tom Cruise in Edge of Tomorrow, that's a big understatement. While yeah, eventually he does become the Tom Cruise tough guy that we all know from his other projects, this was also a big departure for him. He starts off in Edge of Tomorrow as a coward who's forced to go to the front lines, and when he tries to weasel his way out of it, he's labeled as a deserter. And it's only during his training with Sergeant Vertasky that he becomes a more efficient killer and soldier, also giving us some humorous scenes where Emily Blunt shoots him right after he breaks his bones or becomes completely paralyzed.
Oh, come on!
But there is some tension that gets raised when she tells him that if he starts to bleed, then he's got to kill himself because in the Alpha or the Omega, I forget which one, the type of mimic whose blood he got infected with is going to start to want his blood so it can take away his power to reset the day. So whenever that does happen, like when he goes to the hideout that's supposedly hiding the Omega, but it turns out it was a trap, he decides to drown himself when he starts to bleed. Eventually, he manages to get his hands on a device that's being used by the same general that he blackmailed, and is able to find out that the Omega's hiding in the Louvre. Then when his blood is drawn after he wakes up in a hospital, he loses that power, and he has to recruit the J Squad in order to get them into the Louvre. If I were to bring up any criticisms, I wish that we had more time with J Squad because they look like a really fun team to have around. We do get that moment where he's telling everybody then how Cage knows who they are and all the specific details that he's brought up in order to prove to them that he has been able to reset the day. It's not a complete deal breaker for me, but I would have liked at least 1 or 2 more scenes with them. So inevitably they make their way into the Louvre, and Tom Cruise goes out in a sacrifice play where he throws a belt of grenades into the Omega, which destroys it, but then he gets infected with the Omega's blood and goes back in time to the day where he goes to visit the general and sees that the aliens have been defeated and all the allied forces are marching across Europe in victory. I thought it was also kind of hilarious to hear that China and Russia were marching in on the Eastern Front towards their victory point, while as the British and American and Canadians or whoever else are on the Western Front, kind of like the Second World War, advancing in on Nazi Germany. And given the current political climate right now with how we're going against Russia and China politically, found that kind of ironic, to be honest, but neither here nor there. And the ending where Cage goes to visit Frataski in her training area, no words are spoken, but his expression speaks volumes. Oh my god, I completely forgot about Doug Liman, the director. He was known prior to this movie for Mr. and Mrs. Smith, Bourne Identity, and Jumper. Not the greatest movie, if you ask me, but whatever. With Bourne Identity, he used the quick cut shaky cam editing that we've seen in other action movies. In that movie, it definitely served its purpose. Mr. and Mrs. Smith, yeah, a little bit. Nothing like that is in this movie, and I think that was actually a wise choice because there's a lot of wide takes and long takes, and sometimes maybe there is a sense of chaos where maybe there's some quick cuts here and there, but it's meant to emulate the chaos of war that they're experiencing on the beach. So I'm okay with that there. And probably the best direction that he's ever given as far as the films of his that I've seen. So with Edge of Tomorrow, if you somehow have never seen this, you are sorely missing out. Tom Cruise can be somewhat of a polarizing figure in pop culture, but if you like Tom Cruise, you get to see him kick ass for about 2 hours. And if you hate him, well, you get to see him die an X amount of times. A little bit of something for everybody. And Emily Blunt, she's the bomb in this one. I don't really know how much else I could put it, but yeah. Simplistic plot and characterizations, and a good blending and meshing of all these different elements that we've seen in previous films to make one unique and effective story. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there was supposed to be a sequel to this. I kind of wish that we got more from it, but at the same time, if it's only meant to be a one and done, I'm not going to complain about that. Maybe it's just best to leave it as it is. That way it's a lot more special. I also think the box office returns that it got didn't really help either, even though it got a lot of high praise. Probably going to be one of those cult classics in the future. Those are my thoughts on Edge of Tomorrow. Thank you guys so much for watching. Comment below and tell me what your thoughts are on this movie if you've seen it. And as always, see you in the next one.